Welcome back. I'm Mike McClanahan. This is TVW's Sine Die special coverage, and I'm here with ranking Republican member on the House Transportation Committee, Representative Andrew-Barkis. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Good to be here on a beautiful Sine Die sunny day.
It is. It's a sunny day.
It's good. It's good to be wrapping up.
So you came into the session with a significant hole in the transportation budget related to Initiative 976. There were projects that had been frozen until the governor knew what was going to happen with the legislature and where the money was going to go.
Right.
Are you satisfied with where it wound up?
I am. I'm satisfied with the process, Mike. We were able to bring forth a lot of ideas from our caucus and an approach to prioritize. And the chair and I have a very good relationship, Chair Fye. So we were able to really start at the very beginning with those priorities. And one was to get those projects unpaused. That I just disagreed with that from the beginning. For the sake of cost and time and everything, it's just a wrong move. So I'm satisfied with how we came about refilling the buckets of the funds that were lost due to 976, and the projects are on the list. They are moving forward, and we're good for now. So, yeah.
What does that mean in the next year? The money that was shifted this year for the projects that didn't start.
It was an interesting process. So the House, I'm sure through your conversations, we took a little different approach. The Senate took an approach. One was looking at underruns or underspends, and that's maintenance level budgeting. We do that. We look at what was appropriated, what was actually spent, and what's left over, and then we can take a percentage of that. So that's the Senate. The House took a position where we looked at all the projects, and the questions that were asked were, what's the status? Are these ready to go? Is the money being spent? If it hasn't been spent, then we could pull that money back and reallocate it. And then it was a mashup of both those things. So how it looks moving forward is, one, I believe it's given us another tool to look at projects and look at the budget moving forward to really capture those dollars and ask why they're not being spent, how they can be reallocated, how we can use existing revenues. But two, we do have to look at the fact that we are going to have significant revenue shortfalls moving forward. We were able to fix it this supplemental. Going into the next biennium, it only increases as those fees and the dollars coming in decrease. So it will present a problem.
So the first time a $30 car tab initiative passed in Washington, the state Supreme Court ruled it, I believe, unconstitutional. It wasn't implemented initially. The governor and the legislature came back as soon as they could, and went ahead and put those changes into state law, because that's what voters had signaled. That's not what happened this time.
No.
I know it's still tied up in the courts.
No.
You're budgeting as though it will be upheld at some point, but are you disappointed that you weren't able to, or there wasn't?
I would say I'm just, that was a different legislature and a different governor, and we certainly have a different governor now that has been adamant about not doing that particular move, and this legislative body did not. We put forth at least 3 pieces of legislation. I know the Senate did the same, to implement, to actually pass the initiative as written. One was a modified version of that. So I'm disappointed that tact wasn't taken. I'm not disappointed in the way we did the budget, and I'm happy that the initiative passed. And so even though it's in the courts, it passed, and so we should be budgeting that way. And as a matter of fact, there was some movement in the Senate to set aside dollars and have a trigger mechanism to say if it's overturned, those dollars come back, and I was adamantly opposed to that. I felt it sent a wrong message that we were doing a double budget, or one that said if this happens, if this happens. The initiative passed, and so this budget is reflective of that.
What are the major takeaways from the transportation budget this year? What impacts what projects are people going to notice that are going to be funded because of the work that you've done this session?
Well, I think most people really won't see the impacts directly. You see them if things stop. So if all of a sudden the I-5 work that's going on by JBL, if all that stopped, people would see that. They would feel that impact. Those projects are not going to stop. The multimodal account was made whole. The transit grants, the green bill that we did. So all those things are going to be in place, and so you won't see an impact. Right down to the level that loss of services or delays in transit programs or anything else. We did a really good job to protect that. So as far as an impact, I really don't see it in that manner. I would say moving forward, we have more needs, we have more projects, we have more maintenance and preservation, we have the fish culvert issue, we have a lot of things that we have to take care of moving forward. If we're not able to do those funding, then you'll start to see that impact. If we were unable to fund those regional mobility grants on transit and different things, people would see that. You'd see cuts in services. You'd see, cuts in routes or thereabouts. I don't believe you'll see any of that.
Changing tracks, the road usage charge, pay per mile proposal, floated as a possible replacement for state gasoline tax as cars become more fuel efficient and as electric vehicles increase in numbers on the roads. The State Transportation Commission issued recommendations to the legislature that if that's something that a policy that the state wants to move forward with, that it should happen incrementally. I just spoke to the Senate Transportation Committee chair, and he said essentially that there's got to be some way in the future to pay for roads, and that could very well be the mechanism. What do you think about that?
Well, it's not our favorite mechanism, I can tell you that. Our caucus has been pretty adamant about concerns with it, especially around the privacy aspect, tracking people's mileage, how that's going to happen. There are still things to be sorted out. I do believe that we have to put everything on the table. We are seeing a decline in the gas tax revenue as we become more efficient, as we become cleaner, and then move towards electric vehicles and such. So, this is going to be something that is coming. We can't ignore it, and I don't think we have. So even as this session has progressed, our caucus and our members have looked at this and said, if this is coming, then we better take certain steps. And we had a hearing here a couple Saturdays ago where we looked at if this is going to happen, we want to make sure it's 18th Amendment protected. If this is going to happen, we want to make sure we're not doing both. We're not doing the gas tax and the road usage charge. So, these are signals to say, look, we understand that it's coming, so we want to make sure it's done properly. The technology is changing every day. And there's methodology by which you can do it at the gas pump, very similar in a collection aspect, so you don't have to have the tracking devices and the different pieces. So all that's going to be looked at. As a matter of fact, we did allocate some more funds in the budget for the commission to continue kind of next steps with their planning and their research on it.
And just to clarify what I was saying earlier, Senator Hobbs, the transportation chair in the Senate, he said for electric vehicles that this might be the way forward. So he was not saying that it would be for all gasoline, but just wanted to clarify that from what I was saying. But the other thing is, isn't gas revenue still going up currently because people are moving into the state? There's more vehicles?
It is, but you're not, the days of cars getting 10 and 12 miles to the gallon unless you got an old truck or something, but we're getting more efficient. So I would say that it's some of the things I've looked at show declining revenues. Others show very flat, even with the increase in those coming into the state. So is it enough to meet the demand? Do we look at another gas tax? Do we look at road? Again, I believe everything has to be on the table. We are going to be working over the interim, and I say we, my caucus, my assistant rankings and other stakeholder groups, to do the same thing, to look at what is a feasible package moving forward. What are those revenue sources? But more so, what are the areas that we can continue to look at reform? Like I said, this budget gave us the opportunity to really look and dig deeper into some of the reforms surrounding projects and agencies and such. And I think there's ability to do that. In addition to that, we also put a proposal to be able to use some of the revenue in the general fund. And we did have a hearing on that bill. I think that there is other revenues that we can look at before we start to do new revenues.
The I-5 Columbia River Bridge, eventually something's got to happen with it.
Right.
That's the conventional wisdom anyway. An earthquake could take it down, potentially. We've got to find some sort of common ground with Oregon to do anything about it. And maybe more difficult than last time because of the failed experiment and trying to figure out a plan to replace it last time.
Right.
Is that going to happen this decade?
Well, funds were allocated again. The office is open. The state of Oregon and the state of Washington are working together They have reformulated, reworked some of those initial agreements. It has to happen at some point. So, will it happen in this decade? I can't predict that.
Will it get started?
Yeah. Will it get started? Things move very slow in this arena. And when you're talking, that is one of several mega projects, in the billions of dollars that would need to be done. And it's, the logistics alone of how do you build a bridge? Do you do a secondary bridge? I mean, what are all the different things? I think the signal has been made that from the state of Washington that we believe that this needs to be pursued. The resources have been allocated, and the conversation is going to continue. So,
let's change tracks. I know that housing and homelessness, that's something that's close to your heart as well. And you worked on a number of proposals. What are your thoughts about what's passed this year and the proposals that you wanted to see passed?
Yeah.
Where do they land?
I'm disappointed. I think we could have done so much more, even in a short time, because of the pre-work that was done when we left this building last year. I do think we made some steps. We made some significant steps. I was able to, one of the few pieces of legislation that I was able to move forward was a piece of legislation around infill development, which is a GMA issue, where we were able to bring both sides together, where you have FutureWise and BIW and people coming together because they see the need to take steps to get at the supply issue. And I've been saying this for several years. It's hard to not acknowledge the fact that the crux of this issue is a supply issue. We can't keep pace with the amount of people moving into this area. We have put in regulatory parameters over the last 30 years that have constricted the ability to build. All those factors kind of clash together that have created the problem we see today. So there were a few pieces. The other thing, Mike, is that we had opportunity to do some legislation around incentives. And the multifamily housing tax credit is one of the best tools that we have available to us to be able to incentivize private building to build affordable units and more units altogether. I was thinking that we were going to have the opportunity to really move that legislation this year, and in the end it just was derailed. Too many competing factors coming in, and it didn't move. So that's a disappointment to me. The policy that did pass is just a stopgap measure, for a couple years, which we could have done so much more.
We just got a couple of minutes here left,
Sure.
but let's talk about the coronavirus. This is obviously a very serious situation. I mean, largest school system in the state is closed for at least 2 weeks, starting today.
Yeah.
Other school systems have already closed. Gatherings are canceled. The NBA canceled its whole season. Where do you see the economic impact of this, and where does it land on Washington?
Well, first of all, our prayers are that it's contained and it stops and we can move forward. It's scary. It's uncharted territory. We haven't seen this before. I'm concerned about the panic that has been, growing, and economically, you cannot deny the impact that it's going to have on the state. We're about to pass the budget, and we argued when we ran it the first time that we believe that this is not the time to increase spending. We have been increasing spending for the last several biennium, by double digits. We've seen double-digit surpluses. We better be preparing. Our whole process was preparing for an economic change, just in the normal cycle. And now you have the coronavirus, which is, putting this in rapid motion. When you start affecting travel industry, all the different gatherings, all the different things that are happening within our economy, the businesses, Amazon, that machine slows down or comes to a stop, those tax revenues stop. And it's going to put us in a really bad position here in the state. It's of great concern. And it's so fluid, it's moving every day that we're watching this to see, how those impacts are going to be. I'm literally getting calls from constituents worried about their businesses in my district, that are going to be impacted by this.
We're out of time. Thank you very much, Representative
Thank you for
Barkis.
the opportunity. Appreciate it.
We appreciate
Always
that.
good to talk to you guys.
When we return, Democratic State Representative Melanie Morgan joins us to talk about her bill, which is getting national attention. That's after the break. Stay with us.